Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've got just about everyone came in from the lobby. Sometimes it takes a minute for that to load, so we do appreciate all your patience. Folks will continue to join throughout the presentation, but we'll get started here. My name is Amanda Woodall, and I'm here on behalf of CDOT tonight. But before we get started on the Gray Street Greenway presentation, I'd like to first pass it over to Jacob Shelley from the 44th Ward to do a brief introduction, greeting from the ward.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jake. I'm with Alderman Lawson's office in the 44th Ward. Thank you all for attending. And thank you, CDOT, for putting together this presentation on the Grace Greenway.
It's our pleasure to be here. And Jesse from the 46th Ward, would you like to also give a brief welcome?
Hi, everyone. Welcome as well from the 46th Ward. We are also excited to be here. I just want to shout out to other ward staff who are here. Bethel, our new chief of staff, and Maria Barnes is in the call, who is our new business liaison and former owner of Uptown Bikes, who some of you might be familiar with.
Great, thanks for that. We have up here on the screen right now just a little brief overview of tonight's agenda. We've just had our welcome from the ward staff. There will be a brief intro from CDOT, and then we'll get to the presentation. And there will be a Q&A at the end. We have a little bit of housekeeping. In case you haven't noticed, participants are muted on this call. We ask that you type any questions that you have in the Q&A. They'll be addressed after the presentation if the content wasn't already covered during the slides. And then afterwards, the presentation materials will be available at chicago.gov/mid-northeast. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Huff for an introduction to the program.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks to everybody who's jumped on. Thank you to Jesse, Jacob, and others from the 46th and 44th Ward. We have also partnered with the 47th Ward as well, so appreciate the partnership with all of them on not only this project, but a number of projects. And a little background on kind of how we've got here tonight. Biking in Chicago, really since the height of the COVID pandemic, has grown faster in Chicago than anywhere else in the country. Over the last few years, we've seen biking more than double throughout the city. And in response to that, CDOT as a department has continued to expand, infill, and connect our existing bike network. And we're really doing that on a neighborhood by neighborhood approach, working directly with wards and other stakeholder groups to look at contiguous areas of the city together and look at how we identify filling in gaps within those areas of the city. And we've been working over the last year with the wards, like I said, the 44th, 46th, 47th Ward, to look at kind of what we've called the mid-northeast side of the city, really the area from Foster on the north to Diversity on the south, kind of the area in between the river and the lakefront. And when you look at the map here, the blue lines here are the existing bike routes. And we've got a lot of great north-south connectivity within the area. But what we're really lacking is a lot of what we call low stress or family-friendly routes connecting you east and west. And over the last 10 years, it's really been our goal to connect folks all over the north side in different neighborhoods from the river, from our great trail system, connecting all these different neighborhoods to the lakefront, to the many parks and amenities we have. And so Grace, as well as a couple of other projects you see on this map here, are really our focus for this year and for the near term in terms of really filling in some critical gaps in the bike network in this part of the city. And Amanda will go into exactly what the proposal is for Grace. But everything that we're talking about here are components and elements that we have done really over the last 10 years throughout the city. And what we've seen every time we've been doing these types of projects is we've seen speeds go down, we've seen crashes go down, we've seen more women and children riding on these quiet neighborhood greenways than we see riding on busier streets nearby. Um, and with that, Amanda, I'll let you get into it. And yeah, take it
Great.
away.
Thanks so much, Brad. Before I move on from this slide, we're going to look at a few maps this evening that are all based on the same template. So I do want to give folks a second to just drink in some of the symbols that we're seeing here. As Brad mentioned, those light blue lines are existing bikeways. And something else I'd like to draw your attention to are these rectangles that you see at various intersections. Those represent signalized intersections. And so that's an important component of what we're looking for when we're looking for, continuous corridors where people can get really from one end of the study area to the other. And another point that I did want to also make is, so Grace Street is highlighted right here in the middle, like smack dab in the middle of the map. But you'll notice that as far as the east-west routes that Brad was mentioning, the closest one at the north is Bertaux, and the closest one south of that is at Roscoe. So we have like a full mile gap here of east-west greenways. And I just wanted to make sure that we highlight that as part of the context for why we chose Grace. Now, some of the key project notes that we want everyone to keep in mind before we get into all the details. Just as we're going through, the various sections, just please keep in mind, this project is not going to include any new one-way streets for vehicles. So we're not changing any of the directions that cars can currently drive. Anybody who's driving on this corridor currently will still be able to access the same areas that they already do. There does happen to be, just another note, a separate project for curb work that's happening on Lincoln that's happening on Gray Street in between Lincoln and Ravenswood. That's not a bikeways project. It is in our project area, but if you've seen it underway, just keep in mind that that's not a part of the scope of this project, which is going to be basically all just focused on pavement markings and signage, essentially. And another thing, like the final thing to just keep in mind is that all the designs, we're going to talk about multiple types of designs on different sections of different widths and different context. And just keep in mind that each of these designs is chosen based on the street width, based on the volume of vehicles and the speed of those vehicles that we see traveling. And as I said before, the surrounding land use context. So we're going to take a minute to explain what neighborhood greenways are. We actually have 72 miles of neighborhood greenways in Chicago existing, and these are streets that are prioritized for cycling, essentially. They do benefit all people who are using the street. They make it safer for people walking as well as people biking, and as Brad said before, they calm traffic and make things safer for people motoring as well. But they're typically found on low volume residential streets. They are lower stress alternative to busier streets. They tend to formalize already popular routes. So in the case of Gray Street, we already see hundreds of people cycling on Gray Street every day. And so what we're really doing is creating an opportunity to make that shared space safer for everyone. They often include traffic calming, although many segments on Grace already do have speed humps and other traffic calming. They connect people to local assets, and they emphasize, again, the presence of people biking on those spaces that are already shared. So here's, again, just we're going to see several different iterations of this map, but this is the most stripped down version you're going to see. Again, you see the full corridor from east to west, and you'll see that it intersects with about 6 existing bikeways on those light blue lines. So the reason that we chose Grace is, number one, it's recommended in the Lakeview Roscoe Village Master Plan from 2023. Not the only one that was recommended that we're working on this year. Wellington was also included in that plan. As I said before, it's already a popular bike route. We have, at our peak count, we got 490 people biking in 24 hours. That was in July last year. And we also have some more recent counts just from the previous weeks. And we're looking at anywhere between, 200 to 500 cyclists at different parts of the corridor, basically every day. It connects to schools, parks. You can see on the map, we have Bell Elementary, Blaine, Bernard Zell, Anche Emmet School, along with parks, 312 River Run, the Lakefront Trail, the Southport Retail Corridor over by the Music Box, Wrigleyville, And again, as I mentioned, 6 on-street bikeways. But in addition to all those, things that make it a great opportunity, it's also the only non-arterial east-west street that connects all the way through the neighborhoods and has traffic signals at every major intersection. And that's a key component. That connectivity straight through the neighborhood, no dead ends, basically, um, and those safe, signalization at crossings for people to be able to get across safely. It also has relatively low vehicle volume and speeds. The average vehicle speeds on this corridor is less than 20 miles per hour. All these things make this a great opportunity for a neighborhood greenway. Now, it's not, as you're seeing on the west end and as you're seeing on the east end, Grace does not connect all the way through to the great destinations that we want. There are some tricky jogs, and we will be going through in detail how each of those work. But definitely wanted to start out by just giving people the overview of generally what you can expect to see. You'll notice on some of these segments that there are directional arrows, and what those arrows represent are the existing required direction for motor vehicle traffic. And each of those segments will be getting a contraflow bike lane so that cyclists will be able to maintain, their route on the corridor, but not have to be rerouted just for these brief segments. So this is a little bit more of detail. This is an overview of the project. It's a total of 2.75 miles, and we have 3 different types of bikeway designs that we'll be going through. Now you can use this legend at the bottom of the screen, and I will be clicking back and forth to this map. You're going to see this map multiple times. So just try to, get familiar with what you're seeing with the symbols. The polka dot route, that represents shared lane markings. So we have a long corridor for those. Again, like I mentioned, the directional arrows are locations that we'll be getting contraflow bike lanes. And then the corridor, this long section here with the dash lines, that's going to be a longer corridor of advisory bike lanes. And I'm going to break down each of these section by section. So everything that is highlighted in red here on the map is going to be getting a shared lane marking. And we have these on Campbell from Irving Park to Grace, on Grace all the way to Ashland, with the exception of this one very short existing contraflow section. And then also this short section on Pine Grove between Grace Street and Waveland. And there are a variety of different ways that shared lane markings are used. Essentially, what they do is they alert motorists to the presence of cyclists on these quiet side streets. They, they keep people aware. You'll see that, there will be locations where you'll see these green backed symbols, and then sometimes they'll be plain. Typically, the green is in locations where you're coming to a transition, like when you're getting closer to an intersection, and then you'll see the white symbols that are mid-block. The symbols shown here are essentially a bike symbol with a double chevron. And so that alerts motorists to the presence of cyclists and reminds them that they're on a greenway space. But another thing that it does is it is intended to also direct cyclists as to where they can position themselves on the roadway to generally stay out of the door zone. So if a cyclist in this case is riding basically right through the apex of that chevron, they're typically going to be in a location that's outside the door zone. Now, obviously, we know conditions always vary, and we don't expect people to just rely on pavement markings, but that's just one of the other functions that we do have for shared lane markings. So coming back to our map, we're going to move on now to contraflow bike lanes. This photo up here at the top is of Grace Street, just entering into that space between Lincoln and Damon, where there is that existing contraflow bike lane. And this gives you kind of a good feel for what you can expect to see. The new locations are not going to be getting these types of curb extensions, but the signage and the pavement markings are all consistent with that. So the sections that have that, obviously, we have our existing section between Damon and Lincoln. Between Ashland and Southport, there will be a contraflow bike lane installed. Something that we definitely want to keep in mind on that is that we have Blaine Elementary there, and we know that the 46th Ward has been coordinating with Blaine regarding the installation of this project. People have a lot of questions about the about how that's going to work. I'm going to show some more examples of how it works before we move on there. But we do also have this short section of Pine Grove getting a contraflow lane, and then this section of Waveland over here to connect to the lakefront. So this is a photo of a contraflow bike lane over on Leland. It's a location that's about 30 feet wide, which is the same width of the other locations that will be getting this treatment in the project. And the way that this works is, if you are a motorist driving down this corridor, you're gonna see right away that you have the double dashed yellow line going down, demarcating the separate spaces for motor vehicles and for bikes. So what you're gonna do is proceed in the required one-way direction on the right hand side of that double dash line, just like you would, in any other street where you see that marking, and there will be oncoming cyclists coming toward you. Now, in the event that you need to park, for instance, if there was a space open here and a person were going to move over here to park, what you would do is, look for cyclists, yield to them if you see them coming, put on your turn signal so that folks behind you know what you're planning on doing. And then as soon as the cyclist is moved, you just pull on over and parallel park the same way that you would on any other neighborhood street. Here's some other examples. Some little, fresher pavement markings coming from the other end. This is from the cyclist's point of view, how they would be biking. Here are some more examples of the types of signage that you see at a contraflow treatment. There are bicycle scale stop signs that are put up so that cyclists know that they are coming to an all-way stop. Um, at signalized intersections, we are not planning to upgrade the signals, but we do have these signs here to indicate to cyclists that they should be using the pedestrian signal when the ped head goes for their cycle to be able to cross through the intersection. And then just a few other, spaces. This is here for people to understand there will be oncoming cyclists and just to keep people oriented with, what to expect as they're going through these corridors. So that was a review of Contraflow Lanes. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit more about this intersection here between Southport um, at Grace and Southport, right? Because most people know there's a little bit of a jog here. So we do have, a specialized treatment that we're going to be putting in at that location. Now, just taking a moment to let people drink this in. The Contraflow bike lane, so traffic is currently required to go one way eastbound. So the Contraflow bike lane will be installed coming off here and around in front of the school. Um, just a little bit to the west of here, where Jansen Street is, during school pickup and drop off, school staff come out and set up cones and block off this part of the block while folks are dropping off their kids at the school or coming to pick them up. Many of whom are walking to the school, and some are also biking to the school with their families. Motor vehicle traffic does get routed south down Jansen, so it's not coming through this area during the time. We are aware that there will be occasionally cyclists who are traveling through the area, and we've been observing this actually prior to this installation, which is upcoming. We have seen cyclists ride Contraflow through this area, and we have been coordinating with school on that and feel confident in the design that we'll be able to keep people safe and organized during the school pickup and drop off times that tend to happen for about 20 to 25 minutes each day. And the way that this is going to work, both of the turn lanes are going to be maintained here for motor vehicles. So if you are driving eastbound on Grace Street through here, you'll be able to turn right or turn left using these dedicated turn lanes. If you're a cyclist headed eastbound, you have this center lane here. And when you get the green light, what you'll do is proceed straight through the intersection and then make your left. Now, this space here is all existing no parking tow zone. You'll see that it's hatched off. It's currently, that's the current condition. And what we're doing is creating this bikeway space adjacent to that no parking tow zone. These little purple lines here will be precast concrete stops. So this is the only location where actual concrete will be going in. It will not be poured. Again, like I said, they will be cast in place, so they will be able to be installed quickly and with minimal, disruption. without us having to dig and pour. But what happens is, as I said, cyclist continues through, you can go left again on the curbside here and either proceed straight north through the intersection up to Southport, or turn right onto Gray Street where the Greenway continues. Any cyclist that is headed westbound will now be able to proceed again straight through this intersection and do a similar maneuver against the curb. Again, we have those precast concrete stops planned here. Proceed against the curb and either go straight south or turn right down the Contraflow Lane. We also have these paint and post bump outs that are there to shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians in the area, giving a little more of a low stress environment for them as well. So as I mentioned before, these no parking tow zones are going to remain, but they will have a little bit better barrier protection with those concrete stops. So and I realize that it's complex to see from this view. We have several other locations in Chicago where we've done treatments that were similar to this. I'm going to show some examples. It's tough to find, another intersection that's offset like this that is the perfect conditions, a one-to-one match, but I'll show you a few things that I think come close. So this is the intersection of Broadway and Aldine, not too far away from the project area. And this is a photo of the, eastbound one-way Aldine coming out onto Broadway. And Aldine is offset. So anybody who wants to continue to the east on Aldine, you have to come out, take this jog, and then turn right further down here. Now you'll see that, this is a stop controlled intersection. It's not the same as the traffic signal. So the scale isn't exactly the same. Broadway over here is 36 feet wide and Southport is 44 feet wide. So it's not a one-to-one comparison, but this function here is the type of amenity that we're talking about providing. And I was able to get some photos the other day. So if you look at this slide, it's sort of read it as like a comic book style. The cyclists approach the intersection eastbound. They wait for their turn as this vehicle goes through the stop. They make their left turn. You can see them proceeding behind those concrete stops as another cyclist arrives. And then this is another photo that's just a little closer to that jog intersection. Not the same cyclists, but you get the idea. It's a crosswalk coming around, and you have the cyclists in that protected space. Another example to the other extreme, much wider, much larger intersection, but over at Rockwell and Fullerton, you have this protected right turn for cyclists that are coming southbound on Rockwell to be able to then cross straight through the intersection and proceed south, crossing Fullerton and heading down. Here's another close-up. Again, there's no concrete protection over here, but this is the type of curbside design that you can expect to see over there at Grace and Southport. So we've talked about contraflow and we've talked about shared lane markings. The last typology that we want to talk about are called advisory bike lanes. So this section between Southport and Halsted on Gray Street will be getting advisory bike lanes. And the way that this works is it functions similar to any other two-way residential lower traffic street. You have people driving down the road who are on a relatively narrow street, so they place themselves towards the center. And then when another vehicle approaches them, they would move over this dashed line to make space for the oncoming car. And then after they both pass, they move back into the center again. The difference with an advisory bike lane and what you already have on most typical neighborhood streets is that in an advisory bike lane, you have this continuous dashed line. And the purpose of this is really just to alert drivers and remind them that when there's an oncoming car on a narrow street where they're going to have to move over to the right to, make space for everyone to pass, that it's a reminder that they're on the street that is shared by cyclists, that they should be checking their blind spot, that they should be checking their mirror, looking for cyclists in that space. And if they're there, slow down and yield to them before you move over the white line into the shared space. We have this in a few different locations in Chicago. It is shown to reduce crashes, and it's also shown to increase the passing distance that motorists use when they're passing cyclists in this type. Now, something to keep in mind is, we do have a lot of activity over here on Grace Street in between Southport and Halstead. We have Wrigley Field just down here to the south. There's a large parking lot up here that is, frequented where folks will park there and then they'll come and walk down. Um, to Wrigley. So, we realize that it's a robust area and we realize that there will be peak times when people driving down that center lane may not be totally feasible. And one of the advanced questions that we received was, is it okay for a motor vehicle to cross over this white dashed line? And the answer is that when you need to do that to pass another oncoming vehicle, yes. Just like any other pavement markings, lane markings that you see in Chicago when you're out driving on a great big street like Ashland, when you have a dashed white line, that demarcates your lane. And you know that because it's dashed, you're allowed to cross over when it's safe to do so. But it is, imperative that you check to make sure it is safe before you move over. And we do acknowledge that there will be times when it does get congested near this space, but we're confident in the design. And it's currently there are no there's no center line marked off or any other pavement markings other than crosswalks in that location. So we do believe that this is going to function well to help alert motorists to the presence of cyclists as they're passing through this corridor. So we talked a little bit about that and also wanted to mention that we do have an instructional video for folks who are interested in seeing a little bit more. Feel free to scan this QR code. It'll take you right to a video that was produced by our SAFE ambassadors that explains more about the advisory bike lane design and how that works. So next, we're going to talk about transitions because we've reached the point where we've talked about all the different types of bikeways that we have. We're going to talk more about how they kind of move into one another. I did want to mention something over here before I get too much into detail on the east end. I did want to talk on the west end of the corridor, where Campbell is the connector up to Irving Park Road. One of the questions that we did receive on this was just about how folks are supposed to connect west to the 312 River Run Trail connection. Um, so there is no signal here at Campbell and Irving Park. However, through Paul Revere Park, there are 3 separate routes that are very pleasant bike routes that people will be able to connect to any of those 3 from this segment to be able to connect through the park. And the gateway for the park is over here. This is Rockwell. So you do have a signalized intersection here to get across Irving if you need to, or you can, hop skip over the river and there is trail access on each side of Irving Park Road, depending on, which side you're on. So we recognize that it doesn't take you all the way to, directly to the trailhead, but it's about as close as we will be able to get you at this point. And so that's why Campbell is such a crucial part of the design. Even though we don't have a signal head here, we have these valuable connections on this end. And then all the way over here on the east end, we also have a little bit of complexity. So Grace Street does not, it does connect all the way into Inner Lakeshore Drive, but the trail access point is down here further south between Waveland and Addison. And this is just a very extremely busy intersection over here at Lakeshore Drive. And so at Inner Lakeshore Drive. So what we're doing as an alternative is this. This is a little bit more of a detail of that inset. So we will be routing people south down Pine Grove and then over to Waveland where they have closer access to that Lakefront Trail. So this is another slide where we have a lot going on, and I'm going to go into detail on each of these insets. But essentially what happens here is our advisory bike lane will then transition into a contraflow bike lane here on Grace Street that goes past the Anshe Emmett, the Bernard Zell Anshe Emmett School and the synagogue over here on Pine Grove. And then we have shared lane markings on Pine Grove, together with, there are some speed humps existing over there. And then Waveland is a one-way eastbound for motor vehicles. And we will be putting in a contraflow bike lane so that folks who are coming from this connection point over here will be able to head back to the west. So just going into a little bit more detail on this intersection here of Grace, Broadway, and Halstead. All the diagonal parking, all of this existing parking is going to remain. We will have the advisory bike lane that then transmits into, we have just some shared lane markings for this brief transition. You can follow the bikeway through the intersection and onto the Contraflow lane. We also do have this bump out here, which is, again, it's going to be paint and post, but it is there to shorten this distance and make it a lower stress crossing environment for people on foot, because this is just such a large intersection. And we've done a lot of observation, including an observation over here at Bernard's L on Emmett. One of the things that we thought was great and impressive is how organized their pickup and drop off is over here. Almost all of it is happening within the parking lot space. And so you have vehicles emerging, coming out of this driveway. And we do recognize, of course, that that's an important factor for the bikeway. We do have the space across that driveway dashed with these green lines to remind motorists that they're turning out onto a greenway. The school also does have an attendant who works during these pickup times as well, and I, did see him out there directing folks to wait and to wait until it was safe to be able to pull out into the street. And so that's another added sign of their diligence and commitment to safety. And so here we are with our Contraflow lane that would pass through that space. And this is an existing speed hump that we already have over here. Just reviewing this same diagram again, a lot of folks have asked questions about what this intersection is going to look like over here at Waveland and Inner Lakeshore Drive. So this is a screenshot of what folks currently see over here. If you were, this is kind of more from a motorist point of view. Obviously, this is just a street view shot. It's pretty difficult to get a photo out here on foot from a location where you can clearly get all the pavement markings. But what we have is a sort of open three-way signalized stop. You have a stop sign in each direction. And this right here is the access point for the Lakefront Trail. Folks come up on this sidewalk and they follow it along to where there's this underpass that goes under Lakeshore Drive to connect to the lakefront and to Lincoln Park. So a lot of people have questions about this. There have been a lot of conversations with the ward about what opportunities there may be over here. The ward has been reaching out to various folks here at CDOT to see what can be done within the scope of this project. We were not able to make significant changes to this. Bus stop is a major challenge. There's a retaining wall. Um, we don't have paved space over here where we could extend. There just is a lot of complexity with this particular intersection. So at this point, we were able to take the greenway to where at least folks are able to get here on a greenway. And then we just essentially have in the intersection these green-backed shared lane markings that are sort of serving as wayfinding to direct folks to and from that trail space. We recognize that it's very congested over here. There are tons of people using the space, people on foot, people on bike, and we need folks to continue to use their diligence to travel with regard for other folks. Especially people who are maybe using assistive devices or pushing strollers. We recognize that it isn't ideal, but this is the closest that we can come to actually bringing people to the space in a way that they're in a lower stress environment until they get to this intersection and they're able to navigate this either on foot or on bike, and then get onto the sidewalk and move to the underpass there. So that's the detail on this particular treatment. One of the questions, this does remind me, one of the questions that did come up is why wouldn't we, why did we choose Grace Street, and why wouldn't we have just chosen Waveland if we're putting in this Contraflow bike lane to connect to the lakefront? And the main reason for not having it be Waveland is that Waveland is blocked off for events over by Wrigley Field between Clark and Sheffield pretty often. So that's sort of a built-in challenge. It also cuts off at Ravenswood. The Ravenswood Metro tracks are a barrier on Waveland. They're also a barrier, further north as well. So Gray Street was really our best option for being able to get folks all the way from one end to the other. So the next steps for this project, there's currently, some asphalt patching, some pothole patching underway to make sure that, the pavement is able to receive the pavement markings. But we do expect these markings to be going in late summer and early fall of this year. The photo that you see here shows a contraflow bike lane actually being installed. And we like to share this photo because for this project, there won't be any need to impact parking while it's being installed. They're able to go ahead and make this move without having to disrupt the neighborhood streets. So that's another great thing about the neighborhood greenway. And so that's the end of the presentation, and that brings us to the Q&A period. And
Um, no,
hi, Jesse.
I've heard from a few people the Q&A isn't working here. So we initially
I'm sorry, your audio is breaking up, Jesse. If you can hear me, could you possibly maybe turn off your camera for a moment, and that might free up some of the bandwidth? Hey, everyone, stand by. Thank you so much for your patience on this. Please just give us a moment.
Yeah, we'll give Jesse a minute to come back in. I was having a chat with him on the side. I think he was working on a backup for the Q&A. It looks like some folks are having some trouble there.
I see. I see.
do you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So apologies for the technical issues. So I've heard from a few people that they're having difficulty using the Q&A feature in Teams. I think it might be that might not work for, there might be weird permission things enabled. So we can unmute folks. So I think if people want to raise their hand if they have any questions, and then we can unmute you so you can ask your question and we'll figure out the best person to respond. Andrew, you are mic enabled.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. Awesome overall. Been wanting this for many years, so thank you. On the west end, curious if the team explored, in addition to the Campbell connection, two quick things one suggests. One, just some wayfinding through the actual park that might help people find their way on sort of the in the park path to Rockwell. Past like the Boys and Girls Club and all that. And the second thing would be a little more complicated, but I think you could also explore extending this greenway west, sort of past the fire pitch. There's like a sidewalk that takes you to Bradley. So there's like sidewalk space. You could double that amount of sidewalk space for a bike lane and take you on Bradley, past Bradley Place, fire pitch, and then connect to Clark Park and the bike path, running path along the river there. I think that would be like another phenomenal connection that might be even easier than what's described here for Campbell.
Thanks
Yeah,
for those
thanks.
great suggestions.
I'll touch at least on the first part, and Amanda, you're very familiar with the challenges with the connection to Bradley, because that is certainly something we've looked at least in terms of wayfinding within the park itself. There's kind of a handoff of jurisdiction in terms of who's kind of responsible for signage inside parks versus outside, and that's something that our partners at the park district would be playing a role in, and certainly a conversation we can kind of have with them. We've got a number of examples of where greenways and other bike facilities are connecting into parks. Pretty much every single path within a park in Chicago, you are able to ride your bike on. So they make great connections. And in addition to the various neighborhood greenways we have. And then Amanda, this is certainly a connection that we've been trying to make work. But Amanda, if you want to just give the high level challenge to the connection with Bradley Place and yeah.
Sure. So there is a small informal connection between where Grace Street and Campbell come together. There is a brief connection that goes through to Bradley Place that is a private sidewalk. We acknowledge that folks use it. We recognize that folks are using it all the time, particularly to be able to access all those uses that you mentioned over on Bradley Place. But because it is not public right of way, it's a challenge for it would be a challenge for us to deliberately establish that as a connection. However, informally, once you get to the other side of that, looking at Bradley, I think that the opportunity is huge over there. The roadway is also huge over there, extremely wide roadways. The development pattern is a little bit more a sort of suburban type style with big, long, curving roads and lots of driveways. So we definitely see the value of that connection and want to do everything we can to move into the move forward with that when we have the opportunity to do so. But it definitely will be the kind of thing that requires more than just paint and post to make those connections. But we do really appreciate you mentioning that. So thank you.
Next question is from Brandon Seifring, and you are mic enabled.
All right, great. Thanks, Jesse. Good evening. First off, I want to say I do support the project. I live pretty close to the Contraflow bike lane, and so I normally take Irving Park to the lakefront, which is very dangerous, I know, but it's direct access. A couple things was like, one, will the speed bumps on Grace have to be removed? Two, I kind of prefer the Contraflow bike lanes because I do think that they're safer, especially on a more narrow road. Going the other way, people see you. And then kind of three, with speaking with that access to the lakefront, has there been ideas, and I know right away is an issue, with maybe like a pedestrian bridge around North Ave or some sort of alternative method, because getting to the lakefront is always a challenge as long as Lakeshore Drive is there in its capacity. Sorry, I know it's a lot of different questions, but I appreciate the time to do this presentation.
Thank you so much. And I can speak to the speed humps. The existing speed humps will not be removed. All that will remain. If they are in a condition where they need to be improved or repaired, they will be repaired as sinusoidal bike-friendly speed humps. But there is no plan to remove that. Traffic calming, maintaining, vehicle speeds is key for the safety on neighborhood greenways. Brad, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to comment on the second question, but I'm also
No, let me see. So, yeah, I did want to, touch a little bit more on just the challenge with the connection there at Waveland. This would not be the first Greenway we've done where we recognize there were maybe challenges that needed a different scale of solution. The Levitt Greenway from a couple of years ago was a great example of one where there was a dead end right at the Levitt, Montrose, and Lincoln intersection, and we were able a year or two following to improve with a new curb cut, a new bike specific connection through that cul-de-sac. This certainly is a bit more challenging than that, given some of the challenging topography and proximity to Lakefront Trail and the existing bus stop. So we've got to kind of continue to put our heads together in terms of something even larger scale, like some kind of pedestrian bridge or underpass or something. Certainly not something we're pursuing at the moment. We're kind of a bit staying in our lane because there is a quite significant planning and design and conversation still underway regarding rebuild the drive. And so our team has not been involved with that. So So I'm gonna just speak about that a little more generally. But I imagine kind of that planning is really gonna take precedent over any additional connections in the area. So thank you.
You, Brandon, and just from the ward perspective, we would definitely advocate for a much improved pedestrian and cyclist crossing at Waveland and Addison. And if any of you live near there, you will notice that CDOT actually has fixed up a lot of the patchy concrete and the roof. But any improvements more than that is like a huge capital project, unfortunately. And now it looks like we have another Brandon.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you. So I live near the east end of this project, actually almost right off the street there. And I go to church on the very far west of this. And so I'm using this like almost every other day to, I'll just go to church and also for volunteering at my food bank. And so I do have a question though around particularly the intersection of Waveland and Inner Lakeshore Drive, where we have the the green-backed cyclist markers. So for me, that's a really concerning intersection with how it is today, but also how it's designed, because the way that it was diagrammed, it's showing the diagonal bike markers that are essentially sending cyclists right into a stop sign where a car may be thinking they are turning hard right or turning left. And I'm really concerned that there's going to be, everyone's following the law here, and a driver is going to think they're turning left or turning hard right, and they're going to be T-boning cyclists right there. And so, is there any way that we can do, whether it's solid green paint markers on the intersection to show that they are going completely to the right and then down, like almost like an L shape or something? Just because for me, I saw this and I was a little surprised to see this being the solution here. So any thoughts or comments or any alternative designs that you've looked at? I know touching the drive is essentially impossible here. So anything sort of curb west that we can do here to improve the safety of this intersection?
Yeah, thanks for the perspective and your experience there. Kind of the greenback Sharrows, kind of directing towards different ramps. That's certainly been a standard kind of treatment where we have had connections to Lakefront Trail or other parks or things like that. I definitely see your perspective, and we have had instances where instead of Sharrows, we've done more of a green dashing to help to better delineate a path both for bicyclists but also for motorists, and certainly something we can take back to our design team to look at.
Great, thank you, Brad. And I think, from the ward perspective, if CDOT is down, we definitely want to do everything we can to improve that intersection. And now, Neil, it's your turn.
Hello. Thank you for hosting this meeting. Support this project. I really like seeing this new bike infrastructure being installed by CDOT every year. But I do have a question about just the general design of greenways and just this also this greenway. So it seems like that there has been no consideration of modal filters along this greenway to lower traffic volume. I noticed that a lot of greenways in Chicago, they don't have any modal filters. It's just like a normal residential street, and they put the green paint down, put a Contraflow lane down. It's better than nothing, I guess, but it's still not the most comfortable, most safe compared to other places I've seen. And I know that you've done this before, in the Granville Greenway. I remember that lowering traffic volume was a big priority on that street. Just wondering why we're not doing that for all the greenways that we're proposing now. I just want to share a story about Roscoe Greenway I took last weekend, or no, two weekends ago. It was during a Cubs game. I think like since like all the roads are closed, a lot of people were taking Roscoe to get around the closed roads. And then like there's like cars that's lined up from Sheffield all the way to Ashland, and it was so narrow because the cars they're either on the line or over the line, so it's really you're squeezed between these parked cars, and these cars are waiting in line for the stop sign. And like there was a family in front of me. The dad was 3 children, and then the children had to like go between the parked cars and the Amazon van that was waiting for the stop sign, and it was definitely not safe. Like would not feel comfortable with like a 10-year-old trying to like, go between an Amazon van and parked cars. So like the fact of the matter is that there was no modal filter on the Roscoe Greenway, so all these cars that should be like on the arterial roads, they take these side streets. They know that East Data should be prioritized for cyclists, but there's not really anything stopping cars from going through that as a shortcut. So just want to know, like, if you've looked into like traffic, like counting the amount of cars that go on these greenways during like these events, the Wrigley Field events, and like why we're not considering modal filters for all these greenways that we're building now. Thank you.
Yeah, Amanda, I'll take that one, and thanks, Neil, for the question. The concept of you called it a modal filter. Others we've done. You mentioned Granville, and we've got a number of projects that we're working with communities throughout the city this year to really rethink the street network and the purpose of some of these local streets to better orient them more to local access and less to cut through access. We're doing that currently on Granville, where we're converting some sections of Granville approaching major arterials from two-way to one-way. We did that on Long Avenue in the Belmont-Cragen neighborhood at Long and Addison. We are working with the First Ward as well. And those types of projects that, to be honest, when we were starting Neighborhood Greenways, just the idea of kind of rethinking the street network and different access was not a conversation communities were having, and more as the conversation around traffic safety and around providing safe and convenient and comfortable options for all of our neighbors, no matter how they're getting around. As those conversations have really elevated, we've seen a lot more interest from communities, and I think we're going to learn a lot over the couple of projects that we're doing this year in terms of what those maybe impacts are or aren't, and how successful they may be, and how that does change behavior around cut through traffic and not. And so it's certainly not an option we're looking at right now on every single greenway. There is, and you mentioned kind of traffic around Cubs games, which again, we certainly acknowledge that's a special event. We do have traffic counts throughout the corridor and other sections where we know Grace is much more in line with a typical local neighborhood street. So I understand the concern and the support for kind of some of those ideas, but it's certainly something that we're looking at and collecting a lot of data around, so we can analyze much better around how some of these different treatments to limit cut through access and preserve local access, how they work, and yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, next question from CNC.
Hi,
We can't hear
CNC.
you.
If you're talking, unfortunately, we're having some trouble hearing your microphone. Are you unmuted, CNC? Well, maybe we can move on to someone else and try and come back to CNC? We only have a few minutes left here at time.
CNC, feel free to email us at their question at the wards, at either 44th Ward or 46th Ward. And we'll make sure we get to it, or CDOT. But now it is Hector's turn.
Hey folks, can you all hear me? All right, cool. Thank you so much for putting this together. I had a question on the intersection of Southport and Grace, specifically turning southbound going east. So as cyclists are coming east on Grace, they approach Southport, and all the signage just shows how to move constantly through Grace, right? So you'll move north a little bit, go east, and vice versa, coming west. How about going south, eastbound? So if I'm going to Grace, but let's say I want to go down to the music box, where's my place in this, and where should I turn from? Because this isn't necessarily clear.
I'm sorry. So you're hypothetically on a bicycle turning off of Grace Street onto Southport. If you are coming from, if you are coming from the east, you would move straight through the intersection, take your left curb side, and continue south through the intersection. And if you were eastbound on Grace Street, you would come through this way and you would use this right turn lane. This is the one space that would be, technically a shared space where you would be making a right along with vehicles to make the right turn here. So it's a pretty wide lane, but you probably would need to be ready to queue up if necessary, and wait for the signal to then make the right turn there to head south. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I just didn't know if that was if there was going to be signage to make that clear, because I could see people maybe a little less familiar staying in the green and then feeling uncomfortable turning right.
Yeah, I think I could see that too, and I'm going to make a note about that. Thanks for that question.
And Jesse, before you move on to others, I know that we're coming up on 7, so I do. I'm sure Jesse and Jacob, you all will take questions via email if they still come in, and we're happy to see those. So send those to us. And Amanda, I did want if you could just kind of go to the slide with the website, because we do want to let everybody know that this presentation we're looking at will be posted online. So if you do have any questions or want to come back to it, and so Jesse, I'll let you keep going.
Thanks, Brad. I think, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions if both questions and answers are super fast. So, Joe, give it your best shot.
Cool. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So my question's about we're talking about putting down a lot of lines, but a thing that I've seen a lot of struggles with here is the maintenance of lines over time. I know in the 311 app, there's a way to request, or report like burned out signals and all that stuff, but there's no way that I've ever found to be able to report lines that have faded. In particular, some of the bike lanes, some of the speed bumps, anything that's like more in the flow of traffic, I've noticed tends to fade sooner.
Yep.
And there is no way that I'm aware of to get them kind of repainted. Is that something?
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. And I know the 311 app is not the most user friendly app, but I'm fairly certain there is a code for the requesting, or at least pointing out bike lanes and bike pavement markings that are faded. It may be more in a general bike code where you're able to freely intertext. I will say too, as Amanda pointed out, we have 70 some miles of neighborhood greenways, and this is a type of treatment that's vastly been expanding over the last few years. And in years past when greenways were not as common, um, and traditionally any kind of markings on neighborhood streets, non-arterial streets, traditionally those have been um, pavement markings that were really on each ward to be maintained through their own menu funding. As we've been expanding these, we've also been working internally at CDOT to ensure that these types of markings, even though they're on neighborhood streets, are covered within our own maintenance program. And so we've been doing a lot of work on the back ends to make sure the same crews that are restriping, hundreds of miles of arterial streets each year are also hitting these neighborhood streets as well as they get faded. If you guys, anybody does see markings on neighborhood greenways or other bike lanes that do need a touch up, definitely reach out to your ward office. In addition to the 311 app, and they will certainly will and have in the past forwarded those to us so we can make sure they're on the radar of our maintenance crews.
Yeah, I can't find anything under transportation and streets for it. And I do want to flag it as a little broader than just the bike lanes because
Sure.
I mean, speed bumps are a big one, but also lane markers.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of straight up roads.
In
including
311, there is a code. I just did a quick search and I found one that's street paint marking maintenance. Some other folks have been able to successfully submit. Sorry, I just found that in 311. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to let you know that I think there is a way in 311, in addition to the ways that Brad mentioned to us.
Oh, maybe that's not on the mobile app then, because I'm searching the mobile app, and even when I go for street paint, it doesn't show up. But yeah, we can move on.
Sorry. Thank you though for that. I think that's a really valuable suggestion.
Thank you, Joe. And then also want to reflag, as Brad said, for anything like that. Also, you can always reach out to your ward office. Love 311, but sometimes things can linger in 311, as we all know, from months to years. So like, for example, when we had to get the markings at Irving and Sheridan painted, like eventually we just reached out to CDOT from the office. So if you reach out to your ward office, they can usually help with that kind of thing. And I think we can once again try CNC for our very last question. See if your mic is working. We can't hear you. I'm sorry. Any other last questions? While seeing no hands raised. Oh, can you guys do one last question? Brad and Amanda? Okay,
Sure.
From
Sure.
Tim S. You are allowed to speak.
If you unmute yourself, you do still have to manually unmute yourself.
Like that?
Exactly.
Hey, so I'm a mediocre fan of greenways because paint is not protection. But when I was talking to somebody at Grant Park at their planning meeting where they're trying to do things to change Grant Park around, I was talking to the head projects out there about why doesn't CDOT and the Parks Department and the public schools, why don't they come up with better plans that kind of limit and make our streets safer for families in a meaningful way as opposed to just paint? And then ask the alders to back out as to why they have driver priority on the mind. And I would like to see some more exciting designs put forth rather than just paint. And I know that this is a process of getting folks acclimated to the idea of cycles on the road and getting folks more reasonably accepting of bikes on the road, but I really would like to see it go a little bit further for personal reasons, but also for just for keeping families in the city and creating conversations where we're building roads so that kids are safely able to ride on them, so that parents can slow down on needing to drive their kids places, and kids can get to parks and to play places, and like just I don't know, that's overarching thing as opposed to just for this Greenway, but all the Greenway programs that are coming up these days are kind of a lot of paint. And we saw 2 weeks ago where people got a little bit upset about paint on the ground because they thought it was going to ruin it, it was going to change everything over on Wellington. And I guess I'm just looking forward to the days that CDOT is more, I don't want to say aggressive, but more in tune with the calming. I know you guys have talked about it with modal filters and things like that, but I just think that we're getting, with more paint that's going down, it's just kind of becoming more like all the signage that we have on the streets that drivers don't pay attention to, and that cyclists don't pay attention to as well. But like I think that we're over presenting paint and things like that without actually doing anything to make things safe, aside from asking drivers to pay attention. So maybe it's more of a statement than a question, but I don't know if you guys want to address that as being a little bit more aggressive or a little bit, I don't know, more forward thinking, because right now it just seems to be a lot of paint, in my opinion. But thanks, keep doing it. It's going to keep changing the way that the conversation goes on, but I think we should, 2 years of paint and things. There has been good progress on certain streets. Granville is a nice one, but yeah, I don't know. Just kind of just thinking out loud as to why can't we be more aggressive and then have the aldermen demand that we pare things back so we can see where their priorities lie. And I think that, building a great network of bike lanes that are protected and safe is a good way of showing families that they are welcome in the city and they can set down roots and they don't need to move to the suburbs because everything needs to be driven to, because we're concerned about safety on our roads. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Appreciate the comment.
Yeah, I think point well taken, Tim.
Thanks.
Well, on that note, big thank you to Amanda, Brad, Sam from CDOT for putting this together. Thank you to Jake from 44th Ward and Josh, who is not with us tonight on screen, but with us in spirit from 47th Ward to collaborate on this. And thank you to everyone who came and joined us for this informative and beautifully presented Greenway presentation. So thank you, everyone.
Good night, and thank you, everyone.